What do we mean by a transport system? Well, think of some transport systems that you know about. There are highways where cars and trucks transport goods and people all around the country. There are also river systems on which barges and ships carry freight between different ports. A river system may be most like the transport system within the body. But inside the body, instead of rivers, there are many different pipe-like vessels, and instead of flowing with water, these vessels contain blood. This system of blood and blood vessels transports materials to and from all parts of the body. It carries food from the digestive system to cells throughout the body, which use this food for energy and growth. This transport system also carries oxygen from our lungs to the body's cells. And it brings carbon dioxide waste from the cells back to the lungs, where it is exhaled. Besides helping to get rid of carbon dioxide, it takes other waste to the kidneys. Acting as a kind of disposal system, the kidneys remove these wastes from the blood and excrete them from the body in the form of urine.
Let's take a closer look at the different types of vessels that are part of the circulatory system. The vessels that carry blood away from the heart are called arteries. The walls of arteries are thick, muscular, and elastic. With each beat of the heart, these walls stretch as the heart pumps blood through the arteries. After the blood passes through, the walls relax. This regular stretching and relaxing of the artery walls is called pulse. You can feel the pulse of an artery in your wrist. Feeling your pulse is one way of seeing how fast your heart is beating.
Different kinds of vessels carry blood back to the heart. These are called veins. Veins are thinner and less muscular than arteries. Blood moves through the veins because muscles in your arms and legs squeeze the veins, forcing blood through valves or gates. When muscles relax, these valves slam shut, preventing blood from flowing backwards away from the heart.
Arteries and veins are linked by a network of tiny blood vessels called capillaries. Almost every cell in the body lies next to a capillary. The walls of capillaries are very thin, only 1 cell thick. Because these walls are so thin, oxygen and food can easily pass from the blood through the capillary walls and into cells. At the same time, wastes, such as carbon dioxide, can pass out of the cells into the capillaries. Capillaries are so small that they can only be seen with the help of a microscope. But together with arteries and veins, they form a network so vast that if all the blood vessels in the body were lined up end to end, they would stretch for tens of thousands of miles.
Let's take a closer look at what flows in this network of different types of blood vessels. We all know what blood looks like. If you prick your finger, you see that blood is liquid and red in color. If we separated the major components of blood in a test tube, we'd see that over half of it, about 55%, consists of a liquid called plasma. Most of this liquid is water. In addition, plasma contains food, hundreds of chemicals that the body needs, and some wastes. The other part of our test tube of blood contains several different types of blood cells and cell parts. Most are red blood cells. Red blood cells act like freighters. They pick up oxygen from the lungs and they carry it to cells throughout the body, where they unload this life-sustaining cargo. Here we see red blood cells with the help of a powerful electron microscope. In a single drop of blood, there are millions of these cells, which look a little like donuts with the centers filled in.
Blood contains other types of cells too. White blood cells help defend the body against disease-causing bacteria and other harmful microorganisms. Here we see a white blood cell destroying some bacteria by actually eating them before they can do harm. Blood also protects us in other ways. Have you ever wondered why you don't keep on bleeding after you've pricked your finger? Well, blood contains cell parts called platelets that help start the process of clotting when you cut yourself. Platelets cause the growth of a thread-like net. Red blood cells get caught in this net, stopping the bleeding.
Blood has too many roles to describe in detail here. But in order for blood to do its job, it must continually flow throughout the body. A pump is needed to push the blood through the circulatory system. The heart is this pump. The human heart is only about as big as your fist and weighs less than a pound. But despite its size, the heart is very powerful because it is almost all muscle. If you could look inside this muscle, you would see that the heart has 4 chambers, or hollow spaces. The 2 top chambers are called atria. Each atrium is connected to another chamber beneath it, called a ventricle. But while each atrium is connected to the ventricle below it, there is no connection between the right side of the heart and the left. In fact, there is a thick muscular wall that separates the 2 sides of the heart. It is almost as if there were 2 hearts instead of 1.
To see why the heart is divided like this and how blood gets from one side of the heart to the other, let's follow blood as it makes its trip through the body. We'll start our journey in the right atrium, which, from our vantage point, appears on the left. Veins from the body empty their blood here. This blood is high in carbon dioxide that has been picked up from cells throughout the body. In real life, this blood has a dull red color, but to make things clearer, we'll show it as blue. After blood collects in the right atrium, it flows through an open valve into the right ventricle. This valve then slams shut as the right ventricle contracts, preventing blood from flowing back to the atrium. When the ventricle contracts, it forces the blood into a large artery that forks, taking blood to both lungs. Within the lungs, the arteries branch into smaller and smaller arteries that lead to capillaries. In the lungs, the capillaries are close to many tiny balloon-like air sacs. Carbon dioxide flows into these air sacs through the capillary walls, and oxygen flows from the air sacs into the capillaries. This oxygen gives the blood a bright red color. This bright red oxygen-rich blood moves from the lungs back to the heart through a series of veins and empties into the left atrium.
This explains how blood gets from the right side of the heart to the left, but the journey's not complete. The left atrium releases this oxygen-rich blood through another one-way valve into the left ventricle. When the left ventricle contracts, it forces blood into the body's largest artery, called the aorta. The blood flows through the aorta to other arteries that go throughout the body. These branch into capillaries. Here, as we've seen before, oxygen and food pass from the blood into the cells. Carbon dioxide passes the other way from the cells to the blood. The blood, now poor in oxygen, returns by way of veins to the right atrium, where the cycle begins again.
So the heart is actually 2 pumps, not 1. The right pump takes blood from the body and sends it to the lungs, where carbon dioxide waste is unloaded and a fresh supply of oxygen is picked up. The left pump collects oxygen-rich blood from the lungs and sends it to the body, where cells use the oxygen. Our lives depend on this cycle continuing without interruption. In fact, as we go about our lives, our hearts are beating constantly, resting only briefly between beats. This continuous beating points to the fact that the heart is an extraordinarily strong muscle. To get an idea how strong, try this. Make a fist. Remember that the heart is just about this size. Now open and close your fist 70 times in a minute. That's a little more than once a second. You'll soon find out that doing this for even a minute can be exhausting. But the heart of most adults beats on average 70 times a minute. For children, the rate is higher, about 90 times a minute. As we go about our daily activities, our hearts are beating day after day, year after year. The average person's heart will beat over 2 billion times in a lifetime.
A person's heart does not beat at the same rate all the time. For one thing, a heart rate is affected by the body's energy needs, and these needs are constantly changing depending on what we are doing. This is Linda. Let's follow her through a typical day and see how her heart rate varies. As Linda wakes up, her heart rate is fairly low, perhaps 68 beats per minute. But the rate changes as her body cells become more active and need more oxygen and fuel. Linda's heart rate may increase to 75 beats per minute. Later that morning, when Linda walks with a friend, her heart rate probably becomes higher, perhaps 90 beats per minute. But when she stands still, her heart rate goes down again. Later in the day, as she bikes, her heart rate reaches its highest levels. With prolonged and strenuous activity, her body needs the most oxygen and fuel. As a result, Linda's heart rate might reach 135. As the day ends and activity decreases, her heart rate will become lower again, until finally, as she drifts off to sleep, it begins to reach its lowest levels, perhaps around 65 beats per minute, like the transport system within the body. But inside the body, instead of rivers, there are many different pipe-like vessels, and instead of flowing with water, these vessels contain blood. This system of blood and blood vessels transports materials to and from all parts of the body. It carries food from
blood away from the heart are called arteries. The walls of arteries are thick, muscular, and elastic. With each beat of the heart, these walls stretch as the heart pumps blood through the arteries. After the blood passes through, the walls relax.
From the digestive system to cells throughout the body, which use this food for energy and growth. This transport system also carries oxygen from our lungs to the body's cells. And it brings carbon dioxide waste from the cells back to the lungs, where it is exhaled. Besides helping to get rid of carbon dioxide, it takes other waste to the kidneys. Acting as a kind of disposal system, the kidneys remove these wastes from the blood and excrete them from the body in the form of urine.
Let's take a closer look at the different types of vessels that are part of the circulatory system. The vessels that carry blood.
What do we mean by a transport system? Well, think of some transport systems that you know about. There are highways where cars and trucks transport goods and people all around the country. There are also river systems on which barges and ships carry freight between different ports. A river system may be most likely